Hello again, my name is Tim Joseph. I'm the Technical Support Manager for Bradmark Technologies. I'm located in Seattle, and I'll be doing a little bit of moderating in the webcast today. I'm looking at the participants list, and I see many of our valued customers and strategic partners have joined us today for a lot of familiar names that I've worked with directly. On a quick housekeeping note, everyone is muted. And if you wish to ask a question, kindly submit your question in the Q&A tab. And we'll then review those at the end of the meeting and discuss a few of them and get some answers. This is being recorded and the webcast will be available the following week. So I think we're all ready. This is a product preview session presenting the latest release of Bradmark Surveillance 5.1. You get to look at many of the new capabilities and enhancements, and Ed Stangler, R&D, is going to be presented. He heads our development group and has many years of experience. So Ed, you ready to go?
Yes, thank you very much, Tim. Again, thanks to everybody for joining us today during this webinar. Just want to make a quick note about some upcoming webinars that we're having, because today's webinar is going to be a highlight reel of 5.1, the 5.1 release, but we're also going to have deep dive webinars that cover a couple different sections individually. We're going to have a deep dive on Mongo for Surveillance 5.1 coming up, and we'll also have a deep dive on Neo4j for Surveillance 5.1 coming up, because those are the two major new items in 5.1 in terms of product. And then we also have a deep dive on the enhancements to web reports and to time slicing that are part of Surveillance 5.1 and also part of Surveillance 4.8 as well. So you definitely should try to join us for some of those upcoming deep dive webinars in the next few weeks coming up. So briefly for this webinar, we're going to go over some of the highlights that of some of the work we've been doing in our 4.7 product and our 4.8 product. Then we'll go into the highlights of Surveillance 5.1, which is our major new release that we're putting out. And then we'll go into some more technical aspects, a few technical aspects of Surveillance 5.1. So if you're not interested in that, you can just kind of tune out for a few minutes there. And then we definitely circle back to join us for the Q&A session, where we'll be answering the questions as Tim mentioned. So first, for some of the people that are joining us, maybe they haven't seen surveillance before, I'll just go over some of the major points and benefits of surveillance real quickly. Bradmark Surveillance is our web monitoring tool for on-premises, cloud, and container databases. We provide a lot of different metrics across a lot of different areas of the database and the OS. We also provide historical metrics, even if the database is offline. So if you want to find out what was happening at 3 o'clock yesterday, you can easily use several of our features like flashback and time slicing to go see what was happening at that time. And that data is available in a variety of different ways, in a variety of different manners on different systems. We also have reporting for compliance. So if you need to track auditing items like bad logins, or if you need to track SQL or any other types of things like that, we have reporting for that, as well as we also satisfy a lot of security requirements if you're in a compliance environment like PCI DSS or something like that. And then we have also unique metrics for more in-depth analysis in each of the different types of databases. We try to provide a broad range of things across the databases that we monitor, as well as we try to do unique items for each database to provide the maximum amount of information to diagnose your problem and to monitor the availability. Time slicing is one of our major features where we can go back in time in the recent past. So for example, yesterday between 3 and 4 o'clock, what was the top SQL? Or last week between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock. We can take a look at top SQL by each hour of the day to see if there's a long running one that's a problem throughout each hour of the day. Different types of ways of looking at this recent historical data are available. We also have flashback, where we can take the UI back in time and you can correlate different windows to see what was going on at a particular point in time, like last week or 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. We also have web reporting for more long-term analysis. This is against our central repository, where we can actually go back and look at data over longer periods of time, months, years, those kinds of things. And we also have, of course, our audit reports as well. We also have great security compliance. So if you are in an environment where you need the latest TLS or the latest other types of hardening aspects of the product, we definitely help fulfill that role. And we also have an alerts dashboard where you can see the red, yellow, green status of the different databases, the different servers, and those kinds of things. And we help you manage those alerts as well. Or we can also integrate with your own alerting system. If you have a NOC or some other system already, we can easily integrate with that as well. So some of the recent improvements to the product, we've put out our 4.7.3 product in June, and with that we really brought in a lot of great features, minor features, but still great features. We have brought in our SLA reports, or entity uptime reports, where you can actually see the like 99% uptime or 100% uptime and those kinds of things. We can do that across one server or across many servers. We've done a lot of enhancements for SQL Server monitoring. We've done visual query plans. We can aggregate SQL statistics by database. So you can say per database, this is the number of sessions and things like that. And then we also monitor very quick running SQL as well. So not just the longer running SQL, but also the very quick SQL is monitored as well through SQL Server. We did a lot of enhancements for Informix monitoring as well, if you got Informix. We did a lot of improvements to the web client, where we really, a lot of little things here and there, but overall it brought a really great improved usefulness to the web client, improved readability, improved look in various areas. We also did a lot of reliability improvements in the collectors as well. We introduced things like the degraded event for collections. So if something's not collecting for a while, you get an event for that. We also have an event for if it's gone broken, for example. That was something a lot of our customers wanted to get alerted on. And then also, since then, we've also started putting in events in the repository agent as well, if you're familiar with that, to be able to event on that as well. And we also have support for MariaDB. So in addition to our existing MySQL support, we also support MariaDB. To give you an idea of what the visual query plans in SQL Server looks like, for example, this is what it looks like, where at the top you can see we have a query plan visual layout. If you hover over one of them, you see more information on that particular query item. This is very similar to what you would get out of the Microsoft Windows native tools for SQL Server, except it's on the web client. In fact, if you're interested, the top part is actually JavaScript with HTML. So we've already started to integrate some of the HTML5 aspects to our Flash client, which is on the bottom there. But with this, you're able to quickly see this, and you can also save it to a SQL plan and those kinds of things. Our SLA reports, we have different ways of looking at it. This is if we look at it through the web client. You can see a green, yellow status for the different types of uptimes, and you can look at it over different periods of time. So it's very interactive as well. But we can also generate a PDF, for example, and this is what the PDF might look like for several different servers, different entities that are running different databases. We also have some other enhancements we've done since 4.7.3 that will be coming out in a 4.7.4 maintenance release at some point. We have the enhanced compliance auditing reports, where we've really done a lot with improving the performance and the ability and the reports themselves and the data that we collect for auditing on SAP ASD for the Sybase side. And then we also have a lightweight auditing for SQL Server that we've done where it's based off of extended events, but it's for environments where maybe regular auditing and SQL Server may be considered too heavyweight. It's definitely another alternative in some environments. This is what an ASD compliance auditing report looks like, for example. You can see here near the top we have some selects, and then we have command text. You can see an update index statistics command had been running at that particular time. This is in the pub3 database. We also have a built-in function that was being run, object ID. Toward the bottom, you can see there was a row underscore count function being executed against the authors table. So those kind of details are available in the compliance auditing report. And this is page 145 out of a 200-page report. But this can potentially be thousands of pages long type of report for some of our customers who need this. This is another type of report where we're seeing bad logins and good logins as well. You can see some of them are marked as denied, and you get the IP address and those kinds of details out of a bad logins report. We also have done overall improvements, even at 4.7, in some of the reporting stuff. And so here's a central repository space usage report where we're seeing at a glance the space usage in the central repository for long-term web reporting and that kind of stuff. And so this is the kind of thing that we're bringing to a lot of different other areas as well in our 5.1 product. So just go over a little bit of our improvements in our Sybase line of products. because we do have a lot of people on the webinar today that are in the Sybase arena. If you haven't seen the product in a while, I'll just go over a couple of the things as well that from a little bit further back. We have transaction log detail information on ASC, for example, where you can actually see, what was, if there was a session that came through and did a drive-by where they filled up a lot of transaction log and then they took off and you're left holding the bag. That's something you can easily see with the transaction log detail information, where we actually mine the log. We have index statistics, where you can actually click on a database and see things like the index page cluster ratio and other types of things for that database. We also have spin lock monitoring, which, especially if you're still on ASC 15.7, can be a bottleneck. But even still in 16, you can get that. And we have histograms and things like that. So this is an example of the transaction log detail window, where we can see that one of the top items is an insert statement that came by back in March, and they kind of filled up a couple things, and then they took off. And you can see the SPID and the time and those kinds of things. Index statistics provide us, where I clicked on the information below, where I clicked on the pubs 3, for example, and I can see the data page cluster ratio, the index page cluster ratio, and details like that. I can see spin lock activity with histograms as well. Some of these screenshots are a little bit older web clients, so the newer one's a little bit different. On the IQ side, we have full HTML query plans. So if you're used to getting the HTML format query plans in IQ, we have that available historically as well. We can get column and table usage now from SQL by actually parsing it rather than going to the IQ message file. And of course, we still have our multiplex health window for those environments. On the replication server side, we have, of course, our replicate activity window that has a great view of latency and throughput for each replication path. We also have health and exception management. This is an example of the replicate activity. For example, you can see that there's a replication going from primary DB to replicate DB, and there's been 543 milliseconds latency, pretty much steady, and some throughput on the bottom as well. On our flashback capability on ASC, you can see we can go back in time. We can still see the full query plan at the bottom available for that. And then we also have, by SQL, if we do a top SQL report, which is from our time slicing, we can see items that are the top elapsed time, SQL, for example, and I can see the full query plan for that. I can load the query plans at the bottom. There's a button for that. And also there's a tab on here that's not shown here, but you can also get the SPIDs. And this was in our 4.7 product, and there have been some great enhancements in 4.8. And speaking of 4.8, so 4.8 is a release that we put out to add more major features on our 4 line, because there are environments where people are going to want to stay on the 4 line for a little while. And so we've gone ahead and added some enhancements, and we've added a new product. PostgreSQL was a product that we added in our 4.8 release. And once we had PostgreSQL, then we could also have full support for AWS Aurora, one of the many options of databases available on AWS, because they have a MySQL and a PostgreSQL flavor, and we can support both now. And then the really exciting thing also for other databases is the enhanced recent history items. Before, you could always do a comparison between runtimes of SQL from this time period and this time period, but you'd have to open up multiple windows, and it's a little bit more tedious. So we've made that a lot easier to be able to say what's the current runtime of the SQL in a graph, and then versus how it was last week, for example. So it's a great enhancement in 4.8 that makes it a lot easier to compare the current performance versus previous performance of the SQL. Now, that's great if you have a SQL on the top SQL report, and you can click on it and get that information. But if you don't have that on the top SQL report, we need a way to go find it. So we also have a search SQL history capability too, where you can search the SQL history that we're keeping, find the statement you're interested in, and then you can go and load the query plans and get the SPIDs and do the SQL comparison and all those kinds of things for that. So that makes it a lot easier to get that kind of information. And then we also have a lot more drill down information on the SQL history, because we've had a lot of feedback where people need to find out more information in order to be able to correlate what they're finding in the recent history views, and then being able to correlate to something they can go and be actionable to go figure out what's going on with that particular SQL statement. So we've done a lot of enhancements in this area, and this is something we'll be covering in our deep dive on web reports and time slicing, the third webinar I listed at the beginning of the session here. So definitely, if you're interested in these items, you definitely want to join us for that webinar, where we'll be going into this into some detail and showing how just the great things you can do with this particular feature. A little bit on PostgreSQL, if you're interested in that, that's something we've been doing for a while. And one of the things, we were very sensitive on is if people who are running it in the cloud, we have to make sure we do extensions that are available on things like Azure and stuff like that. So we use a couple common extensions such as PG stat statements and DB link and those kinds of things. And we've made sure to carefully pick these items so that they can run in the cloud or on premises with no problems. So now Surveillance 5.1 is a major release that we're putting out. And this has some great new items. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about NoSQL. Our products at Bradmark have traditionally been on relational databases for many years. We have a lot of great experience, a lot of great features on relational databases. And now we're bringing that extensive and innovative technology to NoSQL databases. And of course, when we bring it over, we're bringing over monitoring for all the critical areas. We're looking to see what's currently running, what the important details. These are the current, whatever's currently going, and then seeing the correlating information so you can see the application and those kinds of things with the item. We're looking at what's been slow in the past and why. So this is our recent history, our time slicing capability of being able to go back and say, okay, what was the item that was slow at 3 o'clock yesterday? Also, space usage is another area that we make sure that we monitor in the NoSQL databases. Hot objects is also a big thing for NoSQL. As we'll see, there's different kinds of objects and different types of NoSQL databases. And of course, change settings and also other items as well. Of course, all the critical features are brought over to NoSQL. So just as I mentioned at the beginning, we try to bring our items, our general items, over to each of the different databases. And then we try to bring also in-depth items as well. But we're bringing over the alerting, the uptime SLA reports, that's all available for NoSQL, the recent history, the time slicing, the flashback, the long-term web reporting. All those are available on the NoSQL databases as well. And also with NoSQL databases, a lot of that's open source software, for example. There's a lot of, when you have a lot of open source software, sometimes you get bogged down in dependencies or extra libraries or extra other software you need to install. We've tried to make it a very easy setup on the NoSQL side. We try to have lightweight dependencies in terms of settings, in terms of modules. We try to make it just the minimum possible to be able to get the job done to monitor your environment. We also include dependencies whenever we can. So if there's like a third-party library, like for example on Neo4j, we're using Cbolt to connect. We build all that. We include that as well. So you don't have to go out and get additional software other than the minimum required in order to use the product right out of the box. And of course, we also have deep dive metrics on each of these systems. Some of the metrics are very challenging to obtain. If we have to dive into the Java JMX or something like that in order to get the information for a database, for a NoSQL database, we'll go do that. We've done some amazing things to get some of these metrics, but really we're trying to provide the same level of monitoring, the same first-class level of monitoring that we provide for the relational databases over on the NoSQL side as well, in a very lightweight kind of way as well. And of course, we correlate and summarize the metrics for more meaning, so you can easily see, what does this mean in the grand scheme of things? What does this mean for, what's the correlating information to go investigate this further? And the drill down information is important as well to see what additional information we have on that particular item. So of course, there's several different categories in NoSQL. There's document stores for unstructured data, things like MongoDB. There's also graph databases like Neo4j. There's key value stores like Redis and Memcache, and there are other areas as well. Right now in 5.1, we're focusing on the first two areas, the document stores and the graph databases, and MongoDB and Neo4j. But we do expect to have other areas as well as we go forward. We have some exciting new products planned as well. But right now, this is our first forays are in the document stores and the graph databases. And 5.1 has a couple new products. It has surveillance for MongoDB monitoring. We have surveillance for Neo4j monitoring. Those are both products that provide a lot, the basic level of monitoring and some additional items as well, and all the alerting and all the history and all that stuff is available for both of those databases. We also have an enhanced full suite of web reports. So as we were seeing earlier, we've already done in 4.7, we've already done some enhancements to the reporting system, enhancements to performance and things like that. We've really expanded the list of reports in 5.1 as well. And then we also went 64-bit on Windows, so a little bit of technical there, technical changes in 5.1 as well. So in MongoDB is a document store for unstructured data, like JSON for applications and things like that. I just want to mention a few of the changes, so when I say some other things, it'll make more sense for those who are not familiar with MongoDB. Instead of SQL statements, you have commands, if you're from a relational background, and instead of tables, they have collections. So what we do is our product works on looking at commands that are running a long time. We look at collections that are hot, and those kinds of things. If the MongoDB can be run on premises or in the cloud as the Atlas product, we definitely support both, and we also support Community Edition and Enterprise Edition. So in either environment that you have, I know there's different reasons to run either one. We definitely support both of those. And then we also do, one of the things that we do that sets us apart from other monitoring items for Mongo is that we do the critical and extensive monitoring of MongoDB. We're not limited to just 24 hours of history with a limited set of metrics like you might find in another solution on Mongo. We have a lot more information available for you. We have weeks of recent history. We have the important details that are in there as well. And then with our central repository, we can do weeks and years of history as well, and our web reporting, you can analyze that. So we have a lot more available and a lot better monitoring, a lot more extensive critical monitoring for MongoDB than you might find with other types of solutions for that. This is an example of the kinds of things that we do. So speaking of hot objects, this will be the hot object area where we have top collection activity going on in Mongo. You can see here we have a couple of collections and the amount of time that things have been running against it. So I have the sales.zip code collection, and it's been this certain amount of time some things have been running, and we break that down into query time versus command time. So there's different things that can go on, and there's actually even more columns off to the right. We can look at that by total activity, by IO activity. We can also see lots of other information about locking and things like that. So this kind of recent history or time slicing report is available for finding hot object activity in MongoDB. We also have other things as well. We do something similar for commands, and we'll dive more into this in the deep dive webinar coming up in the next few weeks. There's also Neo4j monitoring that we're doing. This is a graph database, so this is the kind of database that you would use for those who aren't familiar. Things like recommendations for e-commerce sites and those kinds of things are for graph database. If you literally want to find relationships between James Bond movies, there's actually a data set for that we use for testing. And then other things like that you can do with the graph database. It's a great product for relationships. But instead of SQL, they have what's called ciphers, which is an interesting name for SQL type of items, commands. And then instead of tables, they have nodes and relationships. So it's all about creating items like movies, and then relationships like here's the villain in this movie, and here's the good guy in this movie, and here's all the different types of people, and all that kind of stuff is the types of relationships in that. So an example of a top cipher report. So this is the commands that are running in Neo4j. This is what it would look like. I'm running it over a period of time, and I can see the elapsed time of the different ciphers that are running. I see that broken out by idle time, CPU percent, and at the bottom you can see the full cipher text. And this is a terrible query that I'm running that's meant to destroy that session there. But this is the kind of report that you can see over any time period. If it was yesterday, if it was last week, you can easily see that. And we get the full text, the full cipher text for that, as well as a lot of different statistics. You can see that we have the CPU usage at the top. It's a fairly idle instance otherwise. This is mostly waiting because this cipher is just a terrible cipher. We also have the enhanced full suite of web reports that are in 5.1. So we've been providing web and PDF reports for long-term data for a long time now in our web client and in our 4 line. But in 5.1, we expand that report suite quite a bit. We have reports for various target audiences. So we have manager reports versus DBA reports. A lot of different types of concerns for the different audiences. We have more areas of coverage, including more alignment with the recent history. So, for example, the top SQL stuff from recent history, you can do more of that in the reporting, the web reporting for the long term as well. So we've tried to align that a little bit better between the two. We also have stronger reports on auditing. You saw a little bit of that earlier in our 4.7 line. And then we also have reports for capacity planning and trending. So trying to do more with all the data that we have in the central repository. And the central repository, just a reminder, is the real database that you may be holding for longer term data. So for a few days, for a few weeks of data, that would be in a local repository store on the system. But then for longer term data, like months, years, those kinds of things, you would have in the central repository database, which is a real relational database. And then also the SQL runtime comparison reports that I talked about for 4.8 are also available in the web reporting as well against the longer term data in addition. And again, we'll be covering this in our deep dive webinar on web reports and time slicing that's coming up in the next few weeks. So now we're going to get a little bit more technical, but actually before we do that, let me go ahead and show a little bit of the 5.1 product. Just switch over here, just a little bit of it, because we'll be doing more of this in the deep dive. So for example, here is a PostgreSQL report. So this is actually from our 4.8 product, which is also in the 5.1 product. And you can see here we have a PostgreSQL. It's a couple of them that are running. It's a fairly idle system though. But you can see here if I click on the green item or the orange item, I can see the different SQL at the bottom that's running for this particular system over different hours of the day. We can look at that by elapsed time. We can take a look at that by logical reads. Those kinds of things are available. And we can also do this over in the MongoDB. So we'll go head on over to MongoDB, for example. We can take a look at a similar kind of report, except we'll do this for for hot objects instead. And so you can see here, we can click on here and see, okay, this particular object in the system, particular collection is taking up a certain amount of time throughout each hour of the day, and click on another one, see a different item. So this same kind of thing that we provide for relational databases, we also provide for the NoSQL like MongoDB. And we can see this by time, we can see this by write lock times, we can see this by queries and all sorts of different measurements. In addition, we also have the ability to take a look at other real-time information, and I'll just bring up one item in particular. Now, when we go into the deep dive, we'll be looking at concurrency on Mongo and how that looks like on a system. But here I have a pretty idle system. I just want to point out here that when we click on an item, this is what's currently running, we can see the full command text for MongoDB. So this is the full JSON-like command that's being run inside the MongoDB. And in addition, on the top part, we can go over to the right and see information on there, like what locks are being taken out, global lock, lock weight, DB lock, those kinds of things, as well as the client IP address and those items. So just a little bit of this, and we'll go into more detail in all the other real-time windows and recent history items in our deep dive on Mongo. So getting a little bit more technical, just cover a few little topics on 5.1. Again, we're going 64-bit on Windows. So if you are running our product on 64-bit, on Windows, there's a couple of changes. I mean, the server itself is going full 64-bit. The utilities, the console, the NSM copy, those items are 64-bit on Windows. The files are moving from where they're currently located to program files and program data. Right now, they're in program files x86, so that's a little bit of a change there. There's some environment variables and stuff like that that are introduced as well to handle that. Our thin client, though, if you're still using our Windows thin client, remains on 32-bit on Windows, and there's actually two different directories. There's a bin and a bin64 to handle the difference between the 32-bit executables from the actual Windows client versus the utilities like console, stuff like that. Now, 5.1 is a migration, not an upgrade. The 5.1 actually runs in parallel to Surveillance 4X. But you can easily bring over your settings in a migration aspect using NSM copy. So if you're familiar with using NSM copy to distribute the product to many servers, for example, you can use that also to do the migration. You can use the 4.x NSM copy to actually export the settings, and then use the 5.1 to import it. And there's a special flag called --migration in order to be able to convert the settings and do things like that. And the reason that it runs in parallel, there's a couple of reasons why it runs in parallel to 4, but one of them is, of course, that there's a lot of things that are different in 5.1, internally especially, and so it may break compatibility. So while it may be technically possible to get it to work in the 4x topology, it really is best to run it in a parallel topology so that 5.1 is a different layer. So, you have your normal topology with the 4 product, you'd have a different one for 5. And then that way you can also roll it out in a phased way. So you can upgrade servers as you want to. So you don't have to upgrade all of them at once. You can upgrade some and just keep rolling it out until you upgrade everything. Local stores are not carried over from 4 to 5 at this time, but the central repository information is still there in your central repository. Now, on a different note, I know with everything going on in the world, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of political divisiveness, but I do hope that we can all come together in unity about our common dislike for System D. Well, actually, no, I'm just kidding. I actually kind of like System D, but I know that there's strong feelings sometimes. But for those of us that have to deal with System D, we do have scripts for System D coming in our 5.1 product, so we can easily create a service and we can easily start the service with these scripts for System D. So if you're on a Red Hat 7 or an 8, for example, we provide the scripts to make it easier to do the deployment. And in fact, we want to do this on other Unix systems as well and other platforms. So we're trying to do whatever we can to help deployments on the Unixes, on Linux, those kinds of things. And if there's anything else that we can do to help in your deployments, if there's anything that we can make changes on our side to help with those deployments, we definitely want to hear from you, and please let us know. But we are trying to do more and more things to help with those deployments. I mean, we already have a lot of tools, but we're trying to make that easier for people. Things like the LDAP that we created into the product recently, and other types of automated rollout things that we've been doing lately. We have some other utilities coming down the pipeline. They're going to help with the deployment. So anything we can do, we definitely want to help in the deployment of the product. Just a brief note about HTML5. HTML5 is coming in our Surveillance 5.2 product, which will be sooner than later, very soon, actually. And actually, even before it comes out, we may put out a patch available for HTML5, and it'll be available for all versions of Surveillance from 4.73 all the way up to 5.1. It'll be an easy patch to install on a CAS if you have a CAS, or on each of the servers that you want to have it on. So it should be an easy patch to deploy with no downtime. It's just basically a drop-in replacement. That's just for the actual client itself. Now, if you want some of the additional functionality that you see, like in 4.8, like if you want SQL search, for example, and from 4.8, obviously you need to have additional patches, or you need the 4.8 product or later to get that kind of thing. So there are some limitations, but the actual HTML5 client itself will be available for the older versions as well. And as a side note, if you're in an environment that needs TLS 1.3, TLS 1.3 is available already in Surveillance 4.7.3 or later. It's regardless of the platform. So even if your platform doesn't natively support TLS 1.3, we still support it. TLS 1.3 is amazingly different from 1.2. So some platforms, like for example, Red Hat 7, won't have TLS 1.3 support in it. You have to go to like Red Hat 8 or something. Well, we already supported it out of our embedded web server, no problem at all. So if you want to try some of these items out yourself, you can go look at our Bradmark demo website at the URL you see here. This is actually still our 4.7 product at the moment, but in the next few weeks we'll be rolling out the 5.1 product at that URL as well. And there's generally activity in the afternoon, or you can do flashback or recent history to see that kind of activity if you want as well. And this is the kind of thing you would see on that system. This is the Sybase product line, for example, and this is a flashback. We're flashing back and seeing some block activity, some update activity. That was a block tree situation that was going on at a particular time. So definitely check that out if you haven't seen the product before, and definitely next few weeks check it out to see a preview of the 5.1 product. So now I'll open it up for any Q&A we might have.
Yeah, that's great. We did have one question regarding the audit information and the new feature that Surveillance has to report on that. In terms of the origin of that data, is it from cybersecurity or the MDA tables, or both?
Yeah, great question. The audit information is coming from cybersecurity. We actually grabbed that from some things in there, but you don't have to set up a I forget what it's called, the function that does the rollover information. You don't have to set any of that up, but we do get it out of cybersecurity. So it is coming from ASC auditing proper.
Perfect.
So any other questions?
Well, it was a great run through, Ed, and we appreciate that very much, and you're sharing your time with us today. Feel free to reach out to Ed or myself with any feedback or thoughts on today's session. And we do have another question coming in about the dates of availability for various versions. I think the date of the availability for 5.2.
Right. So like everything else these days, it seems like the COVID stuff has delayed a lot of things in our lives, and it delayed some of our releases coming up, but we are starting to put them out. And so 4.8 and 5.1 will be available shortly, and then 5.2 will probably be kind of stacked up here, probably available pretty quickly as well. But the HTML5 is specifically, if you're looking for that, that's going to try to be available earlier, as early as possible. So that may actually come out before as a patch, but the 5.2 should be out a little later this year. But the other product should be out pretty soon.
Thanks, Ed. And another question, I think you mentioned about adding HTML to 4.7 to produce some new information. And the question is, which is better then, to upgrade to 5 or to patch 4.7?
Well, definitely, if you're not up at 4.7.3 yet, you definitely should get up to that, because you're going to need that version of minimal in order to do the HTML5. But definitely, you know, if you are currently on a 4 product, I think it's great to upgrade to the latest version of 4. And then the 5 really, you know, we're offering both items as an option, so you can have, if you want to stay on 4 and you want to do in-place upgrades, then we have the 4.8 product that's gonna be available, and you can stay on the 4 line. But if you want to go to the 5.1 for some of the features that are in there or some of the new products that are in there, then we have that available as well. So it really depends on the environment, but there shouldn't be anything that forces you to go either way. So it just depends on the environment.
And yeah, thanks. A good answer. And another question, just paraphrasing, the upshot being that the new things are MongoDB and Neo4j. But I think you also mentioned some things that were new for ASE and replication. Can you just highlight those briefly?
Well, a lot of the stuff I showed earlier is actually in our 4 product. So if you get the latest 4.7.3, you get a lot of that. However, as I mentioned, the SQL search and the recent history enhancements are with our 4.8 product or our 5.1. So if you're on a 4.7 and you're interested in the recent history enhancements, where you can see more about you can compare easier the SQL performance now versus last week, or you want to do more of the details that we're going to offer. And again, we're going to go into a deep dive on that on our on the third webinar on the list here on the screen right now. We're going to go into more detail there, so you may want to check that out so you can see if that's something you want to do. And if you do, then the question is, do you go to 4.8 or 5.1? And I think the easiest route is to go the 4.8 route, but the 5.1 route is definitely great too. It depends on how you want to do it. The advantage of going to 5.1 is that you're going to be able to upgrade to 5.2 easier, because eventually you're going to have to do the migration. So if you go to a later version, but either 4.0 or 5.1 will get you all those ASE enhancements, I think, on that. And then the web reporting enhancement, that's only 5.1 though. So if you want the web report enhancements, which are the different, the greater selection of reports, the different target audiences, those kind of things, that's in our 5.1 product. Right. There's also some management aspects to the central repository that are going to be enhanced in the 5 line. So that may also be a factor.
Sure. Yeah, but some of those enhancements pertain to ASE in particular, correct?
Well, the web reporting it impacts all of our databases, but in particular, ASE for sure. There's a lot of things in there, in that pack of stuff. There's really, we really, ASE is one of our major platforms that we start out with development of new features, and so it's always going to be the best on any version.
Yeah, that's great. So just to summarize, then, the new efforts and features are not just in MongoDB and Neo4j, but also a lot of new things have been done in the ASE and other areas.
Right. The web reporting is a big area where it's been in other areas, not just Mongo and Neo4. Jay. And there's also other types of enhancements in 5.1. But definitely the big focus for us is the major new products and the web reporting enhancements. Those are the big things in 5.1. And then we're going to see more new products in 5.2, and then also some more enhancements in some areas. So we're definitely got some interesting things planned for ASE and the Sybase products in general. With SAP releasing ASE 16.1 at some point, we're going to be doing some things for that, and of course we're always supporting the latest versions of the Sybase products from SAP. We're fully supporting the Sybase products for many years to come here, and we're doing a lot of work with that. Again, that's our main area of going to first with new features. One of the major areas that we do new features on.
Right. Great. Yeah. Thanks for that, Ed. And one more question was inquiring about the difference between time slicing and flashback, and also if you could describe how you use flashback within time slicing.
So flashback is when we take things back in time. So we take the real time, like we saw, I showed earlier, the Mongo, the current running command in Mongo. If I were to do flashback to yesterday at 3 o'clock, I could see what was running at 3 o'clock yesterday. So any of the real-time windows, doing flashback takes me back in time. I can open up other windows and see that same view at that point in time. That's flashback. So it's really a point in time kind of thing. Whereas time slicing and recent history are more, I want to see over a time range. So let's say 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock yesterday, what was the top command in Mongo, or the top command in ASE, or whatever, that kind of thing. So it's over, time slicing is our time ranges of items, as well as I mentioned, with ASE in particular, you can drill down more and you can do comparison graphs and stuff like that in our 4.8 product. So but the time ranges is really what time slicing and recent history is all about, whereas flashback is a point in time. And of course, you can use them in combination. So a lot of our customers, they'll use the time slicing and the recent history to look, okay, I have this, we had it slow down yesterday at 3 o'clock. Well, here's what was slow around 3 o'clock. And you can, when you open it up, you can see, here's what was happening for maybe an hour stretch of time, and then you can redo the report for a smaller stretch of time, and then at some point it gets to the point where, okay, I need to go look at actually what was running at a particular point in time, and then you can go to the flashback at that time and see, okay, what's going on at that particular time, correlate it with other windows, processes, those kinds of things. So they're really used in tandem a lot of times to investigate a problem.
Great. Yeah. Thanks very much for that answer. So the flashback is going to a point in time and seeing the windows populate with data that's been stored during that time, and the recent history is a time range. So that's interesting. Great. And do we have any more questions? Did you mention Informix at all, Ed?
Yes, yeah, we have Informix monitoring. So a lot of the monitoring we do was one of the things that we've recently done some work in. So a lot of the things that we do, we are available for Informix as well. And all the versions, including up to 14.10.
Perfect. Well, great. Well, I learned a lot, and thanks very much, Ed. And a note, we have some email announcements and other upcoming 5.1 webinars featuring deep dives for specific database supported products. So look forward to those. And we appreciate your time, and thank you for joining us today. Have a great day, and please all stay safe.